At the IPI's 75th World Congress in Vienna, Broadcasting Scotland spoke to two Afghan journalists about their experience working in exile since the takeover of the Taliban in 2021. Linda Graham spoke to Zahra Nader and Shafi Karimi, two Afghani journalists who have founded their own news outlets and now operate in exile. The two journalists discussed their experience working as journalists since the takeover of the Taliban in 2021, including their censorship not just of women's rights but of their acknowledgement in public life. Since leaving Afghanistan, Zahra has founded the Zan Times and is now based in Canada, where she studied a PhD in Women and Gender Studies, intending to return to Kabul University to teach. Since 2021, this has become no longer possible, so she formed the Zan Times as a means of advocating for female Afghan journalists by covering the acts of misogyny being committed in the nation. Shafi reported on the Taliban's takeover in 2021 and founded Future Afghanistan, which specialises in investigative journalism in the country. Since leaving Afghanistan, he now lives in France, contributing to several publications and continuing to shed a light on life in Afghanistan. Shafi also spoke at the World Congress's discussion on operating as a journalist in exile. Here's what the two had to say on the Congress, working in exile and the importance of free press in Afghanistan.
It's good to see you here, Shafi, and it's, I think, first time that we are meeting. We might have met in Kabul during the press conferences. So here being in Vienna for IPI conference. It's amazing to be here and to meet you and also to reconnect and hear from other journalists that are coming from across the world and also experiencing some of the things that we are experiencing, being in exile and living under authoritarian regime. I'm here definitely to speak about journalism in Afghanistan, about exile journalism, but particularly about women's rights in Afghanistan, about the situation of women journalists. And I spoke at a panel just earlier on Saturday, and I talked about how important it is for us to pay attention to the situation of women, to the situation of Afghanistan in general, but particularly for me, the question of women is not only about women's rights in Afghanistan, because I believe what's happening to women in Afghanistan is affecting women everywhere else, and it's bringing the bar low of what could be denied to women globally, and there is not anything that the international community can do to reverse that. So we are seeing that in Afghanistan, which is a very scary trend. But for me as a woman journalist, the struggle is how to keep my colleague in Afghanistan safe, especially women journalists who have been totally disappearing from media landscape in Afghanistan. And to quote one data that I feel is very saying is the Reporters Without Borders report that they published on December 2021, 4 months after the Taliban takeover, and it says that from every 5 women journalists working in Afghanistan, 4 of them have lost their job and only 1 left still working. And that one woman journalist, I'm very interested to understand what struggle she's going through, the pain. I talked with some of them who are talking about the experience of gender discrimination, about lack of pay, about censorship, threats by the Taliban, and even some of them talk about when they go out to try to cover a press conference, they are being denied entry to the press conference, being told that you are not allowed to go in because there is no place for women. It's only men that are allowed to go in. And it has created a lots of problem for them, but also some of these women totally, they are stripped of their basic human rights. They're imprisoned in their home and no longer journalists. So my struggle is how to ensure that women journalists in Afghanistan can continue their work alongside with male journalists, because I understand they are also going through a lot. And the recent human rights report, which published this week, is talking about this, that how journalists are being intimidated, that even male journalists are being told that because they cover a woman's issue or even women's health, they are being targeted, and especially the journalists that are working with exile media. So for me, it has been a struggle to continue this work for 3 years that I am working as editor-in-chief of Zan Times. Zan Times is an Afghan women-led media outlet that I started 1 year after the Taliban takeover, and it was a response to the Taliban operation of women in Afghanistan. And for us as a woman journalist to be able to be the authors of our own stories and not be only victims in other people's stories. So we want to be able to tell that story. We want to be able to tell the story of Afghanistan. It's not easy. There's a lot of struggle that we are facing, and I think that some of the struggle is also shared. So I also want to hear from you that what you're experiencing working for Future Afghanistan.
Thank you, Zahra. I'm very happy to see you in here. Unfortunately, we couldn't meet each other in Kabul, but I followed you since I think 2014. We are connected in social media. Very happy to see you in person in here. It's my second time that I'm in IPI. Actually, last year I was in Sarajevo. The topic was not the same like this year. This year it was about the exile journalists and exile medias, but last year it was about the freedom of speech in Afghanistan and also the other countries that the panelist was from the different countries. So we will talk about freedom of speech, but this year it was about the exile media and exile journalists. So let me tell you that you're doing a great job. I read lots of your reports. We need it because as we know about the current situation inside Afghanistan, it's very difficult for the women journalists to cover the stories from inside, but you managed to do it, and I think you have some colleagues inside Afghanistan as well. Yeah, I know it's not easy at all, because I'm also leading a small newsroom, and even so, my female colleagues are not inside Afghanistan, they are all outside, but my male colleagues are inside, and I know how it's difficult, even for the male journalists inside the country to cover the stories from inside, as we know about the censorship and many other problems. But let me talk a little bit about yesterday. So the moderator told me that you should talk about the journalists in exile in Europe, in the Ost countries, for example, Germany, France, the other countries that lots of Afghan journalists, they were living in these countries. But I talked a little bit about myself, my experience that when I came for the first time in Paris before the Taliban came back to the power. I left Afghanistan 6 months before. Many people ask me that maybe you know something, that something will be happening in 6 months, then you left. No, I didn't know anything, but it was a very difficult situation at that time. That's why I decided to left. So, but yesterday I talked a lot about my colleagues, and our colleagues actually, in Pakistan, Iran, and Turkey. Because in Europe, so they are in here, we are living in Europe, and it's, I can't say that it's a very safe place for the exile journalists, but at least it's safe, and we have an accommodation. Some of us are still working as a journalist, but some of us no. But the situation is very, very different for the journalists in Iran and Pakistan. To make some points, for example, I know some of them, they are right now living there illegally because of the visa problems after the conflicts between Taliban and Pakistan. The Taliban makes the decision to deport all the Afghan migrants from there, and refugees, and journalists is also including them. So now they are living like an island. Even when they need for a doctor, they are not going to the doctor because they don't have a visa, and they are just worried of their arresting by the police of Islamabad. Or in Iran, it is the same thing. So you know better than me, because we are all every day we are following this news from them, and But unfortunately, since 3 days ago up to now, I heard the news that 3 of our male colleagues, they are arrested by police of Pakistan. Hopefully 2 of them is released, but 1 of them is right now in jail. So I don't know if he is released or not, or what will be happen. So let's see. But at all, I'm very worried about them, because the main problem is that I talked yesterday as well, but the RSF is only the organization who is right now working with the journalists in Pakistan, in Iran, and Turkey. But the problem is that the verification of these journalists takes so long time. Then why a journalist, like an Afghan journalist, that everybody know that what's going on inside Afghanistan, and it's to every journalist there's a direct threat to them, but like the international organization, including RSF, they are taking 4 months to just verify a simple case of a journalist, that is real a journalist or not, or the case is real or not, or something else. But I asked yesterday that they should speed up this process, because they need it. And the journalists can't wait for 4 months to just get a verification and then apply for a visa. Then the visa process will take like 2-3 years. Or for some of journalists, since 2021, they left country and they're still in Islamabad up to now, without any response from the side of embassies of Germany and France there. And the other thing is about the accommodation problem, and also about those journalists that they receive a rejection from the side of German embassy and also France, and they didn't know that how to deal with that because they don't have money to pay for a lawyer. And I asked this international organization yesterday that the journalists in these countries, they need to have access for a free lawyer in these European countries, because in the state of these journalists, these people must be appealed in here for free for them because they need it. Now I know that 20 journalists in Iran and Pakistan, they are in the same situation and they don't have access to lawyers. So it's very important to talk about it and to ask this international organization to help them in this regard. There are many other problems, unfortunately, but I know that you're more than expert than me about the situation of women journalists because you're closely working with them. And it's very important to talk about them more than because it's okay now. I'm part of in TV channels and also in radio stations and magazines. There are a lot of male journalists. They are still working, but we can see a very small numbers of women journalists that they are working with the TV channels inside the country. Maybe I can hear more about it. The problems that you have in your newsroom regarding when you are going to cover stories about an Afghan woman or the narratives of Afghan women, and about the lack of verification, lack of sources inside the country, and some other problems. Maybe you can say something, because I already had this experience when I'm going to work on a report, but it takes a lot of time. Like for a very simple report, I need to spend like 1 week to get all the information, but sometimes the information is false and it's not true because we don't have access to people to verify the news. Is it something that challenges for you as well or not?
I think it's a very important question, because a part of our work as a journalist, we need to be able to say this is facts and this is true, and be able to have a way to verify the truth. And I think that's what the Taliban are targeting. They're trying to ensure that there is no way to verify, there is no way to report the facts of what the Taliban are doing on the ground to the people of Afghanistan, but particularly to women. So they are trying to block all of our ways from accessing the information. And one of the most recent restriction was on the internet. So we experienced 48 hours of internet blackout in Afghanistan. And I think part of who they targeted was actually stripping women of the right to get education online, to be able to connect with the world online and raise their voice, and also journalists and dissidents who wants to raise their voice. And internet sometimes is their only way to speak with somebody out of Afghanistan about these atrocities, about what the Taliban are doing and what they're experiencing. And I think it was for the Taliban to make work with exile media crime for journalists in Afghanistan. That is a saying fact about the situation of journalism and journalists in Afghanistan, the situation of press freedom. It is that the Taliban are trying to create a propaganda. They're trying to turn the media in Afghanistan into their own propaganda machine, where only the truth or whatever is being reported is what the Taliban approve and what they allow to be aired and talked about. And that definitely excludes any conversation about women, about women's rights, about women's health, anything related to women, anything that's casts the Taliban in a negative light is a no topic. So for us, the way we have structured is most of our work is in a way that we are trying to work between keeping our colleague safe, and also safety doesn't exist the way, like one of the biggest challenges that I experience is how to keep my colleagues safe in Afghanistan, because you are not allowed to report the truth, right? You cannot say that the Taliban is doing this or doing that. What the Taliban consider journalism is that one that it goes to a Taliban official, and then he looks at this and says, okay, this is good to go. This is good for us. Like, you can publish this. So if you don't do that, you're somebody who is working against the government or against the regime in Afghanistan. And I feel that's very much is an attempt by the Taliban to turn the media in Afghanistan into a propaganda machine, and also to ensure that no independent voices from Afghanistan get out. And one of the ways that they have tried to do is to actually make it very difficult to verify information, to talk with the people. And so part of our work is, if you have noticed, that we don't cover daily news. We try to focus more on feature and investigative work where we can invest some time. So for us, part of our work is to build rapport and to build trust with our sources in Afghanistan. Sometimes we need to call one source 3-4 times and have just a conversation on topics that is ordinary, that this person might not be scared to talk about. And then once we feel that this person is knowing us enough to trust us, then we go with the real question and ask, like, is this really happened? What do you know and what do you experience? So sometimes that really help. And there's times that it takes for us 4 months to just make this connection, to make the source trust us. And that's difficult. So for our story, we mainly try to, the fact that what we publish is we try to verify it with 2 independent sources. So once we hear this coming from one source, we would try to find another source from that place to tell us that, yes, this happened, and a bit more details. So for us to get really complexity of what the event was, how it happened, why it happened. So we try to be able to gather this information before we post it out or before we publish it. So this is not easy, and that's, as I said, that's why we have to invest some time. And I understand with the funding cut, with the media that's suffering, it's a huge work to be able to find yourself between trying to keep your journalist colleagues in Afghanistan safe, ensuring that they can still continue working as a journalist, reporting the truth and claiming to this professional title that, yes, I'm a journalist. And then the other thing is thinking about how am I going to pay them at the end of the month? How can I ensure that they receive a minimum salary that they can survive with, feed their children? And there are some talk about like citizen journalism and volunteers, but I personally am disagreeing with that concept of like, I feel it's not ethical to ask journalists in Afghanistan to volunteer because they are risking their life. What we publish, what we are able to do outside Afghanistan is at the cost of the journalist on the ground who is doing the work, who is bringing us the information. And I think our role is to try to protect them with whatever means that we have, and also try to ensure that we can pay them a fair wage. And that has been a huge struggle for me. I cannot tell you how much I have bumped myself into the black door walls, that I feel that I'm isolated, that I'm not being heard the way I need to be heard, and there is not a lot of support, except what I find is more important is I feel there are a lot of people who care for the story of Afghanistan. And today in the panel that I spoke, I feel that these people who came to that panel, they came also with this perception of they want to know more about what's happening there. And our role is to ensure that our story, the story of Afghanistan, reach the intended audience, the people who care. And I think there are sometimes, so I have a newsletter. And when I send this newsletter to the people, and I get a lot of engagement. People write back to me and talk. And sometimes some of those people who are in our newsletter, something happens in Afghanistan, they would write me an email or a message. They would tell me, like, I'm thinking of you and thinking of your colleague. I have heard this, and I'm just like, that's what we need to keep going, that we feel that we are not alone, that there are people around the world who care for us. And that has been my experience, that there are people. And for us, part of our mission is to reach those people, to inform them, and hope that they would come to our support, that they would stand with us trying to raise and share these stories and inform the public in their own countries. That has been my struggle and my hope, and I hope that we would be able to continue this work moving forward and being able to do better and receive support, hopefully. It's
very important, Zahra. Yeah, you're right. I listened to your speech in the panel when you said that when you're pitching the stories to the international media, so they ask you that what's the angle of this country in your report, and it's the same for me. But and 2021 in 2022, it was a little bit, okay, when we are pitching the stories for the international medias, they accepted like one or two of them in 1 month. But after that, it's completely stopped. And when I pitched the topics for them, they told me that, so nothing has changed, and if there's something new, it's okay, but about the women's rights, human rights, it's something that we already did reports before, and there's no updates, and let's keep in touch maybe for the future reports. But after that, I just thought about with myself that, oh, so if I'm going to send the pitch to the international medias and then I receive this kind of negative response, should I stop or should I continue working? What I should do? The same things that it was the creation of Zen Times. On that time, you said you were sitting in the coffee shop, but I was at home on that time, and I came and I said, why I should not start my own newsroom, and why I should stop my writing about Afghanistan. So this is maybe the only way that I should write about my country, about my people, and raise their voices from here. And the other hand, to support my colleagues in Afghanistan and also those who are still waiting for some opportunities in Iran and Pakistan. So that's why I come and I create Future Afghanistan. Now I'm very happy because some of my colleagues in Afghanistan, they are still working as a journalist. You're right that it's very difficult for them. But still some of them are working from Islamabad, and I'm very happy for them as well, because now they have a small payment, like receiving every month to just spend their times in such a difficult situation in Islamabad as well. But at the other side, when we are receiving the messages and also calling from the people inside Afghanistan, mostly from the Afghan young girls, you know, sometimes when I'm reading this message, and it's feeling me very sad, because I know that maybe you are receiving also such a kind of message, mostly when the internet is shut down for 2 days, and after that, the people, when they connected back to the internet, and they send that message that, oh, it was very difficult for us, mostly for those who are still learning online. So now that's why I'm very happy for that I can publish these stories to our website and social media, because the world must know that what's going on inside, and what the people inside think about their own life right now under the control of the Taliban, because it's not easy for them to raise their voices inside Afghanistan. And of course, the voice of the young generation of Afghanistan, because it's much more important for us to raise their voices. The university is closed, schools closed for them, and there's no hope for them. For now, the only hope is that to still continue their studying online. But if something happened once again for the shutdown of the internet, what they should do. So this is all stories that now I'm happy with my team that hopefully we are covering this in our newsroom. And to say very short that I'm now proud of my team, that with a small newsroom, now we have a big number of audience from inside Afghanistan, and they are happy because we are in here to continue working as a journalist and raise their voices. Just I want to ask you, maybe you have your idea as well, that why it's very important to continue working as a journalist in exile.
Thank you for sharing your experience, and I really appreciate, all of us trying to do our parts into raising the story of Afghanistan and raising awareness. Why I do, I think what the Taliban are trying to do, they are trying to intimidate us. They are trying to say that we should not be journalists, that we should not be allowed to report the truth. Therefore, we must be, and we must speak louder when they're trying to ban our voices. And I think the truth we tell threatens their lives. That's why they want to silence us. That's the one. They want to ensure no journalist from Afghanistan can be able to publish independently and publish the truth. So that's why They are trying to silence us. And I'm happy to see you and see many of other colleagues from Afghanistan setting up their own initiatives or working with other platforms trying to raise the voice of Afghan women. And also not journalists, but many Afghan civil society. I'm just seeing a lot of initiatives, mostly run by women, and being very active in doing this work. So this is all hopeful for me that hopefully the next generation of Afghans would be able to live a better life. It's hard to imagine it now with the Taliban being in power, but I think let's not lose hope and be hopeful, because without hope we won't be able to live. And I'm hopeful for the women who are still standing up in Afghanistan, for those who are messaging the media and talking about their fears, their hopes, the way that they are surviving, about their trauma, and the journalists who are still working in secret, the women who are running a secret school in their basement, and all the people who are doing whatever in their power to keep, to survive these days, but also to keep hope alive. And I think for them, they are inspiring me every day to do this work, waking up and trying and saying, what is my purpose? What's the meaning of my life? It is to be the voice of those who, not to be the voice, but to create a platform, an opportunity for them to be able to speak their truths and to be able for us to be part of a change that we want to see in Afghanistan. And I think that starts with each of us seeing ourselves as a part of that process and saying, what can we do to change the situation? So it was very hopeful to see you here and also see some other colleagues here. It was very inspiring, and I hope that we can connect more and be able to create a united front against the Taliban in terms of being able to raise the story of Afghanistan, tell the story of Afghanistan in its full and complex layers. Again, it was really nice meeting you here.
Thank you, Zahra. I'm very happy. Together we can do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.